Hi, Edvan. Thank you for coming to the Investor Talk.
Hi there.
Thanks for your time. So let's start. If you want to give a short introduction to yourself and the fund.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for asking us to talk today. So my name is Edward Keelan. I'm investment principal at Octopuss Ventures. Octopuss Ventures is part of the Octopuss Group, which is a larger investment company that invests in all sorts of things from property to renewable energy. But we are the ventures arm of that. And within Octopuss Ventures, we manage just over or just around about 2 billion sterling in early stage ventures. It's probably worth noting that we're a B Corp, which means we're trying to invest in the people, ideas, and industries that change the world for the better, and that's kind of the ethos of a lot of what we're doing.
Thank you, Edward. Can we start with the geography and area you prefer to invest?
Yeah, we're fairly global. I mean, Europe is our main focus and companies with a UK presence. But we've invested in companies all over the world, everywhere from kind of New Zealand recently to Germany to Holland, but really we're quite global. We don't look hugely at the US as a sort of early stage stuff, just because obviously that is well covered by US VCs. But as long as there's kind of a UK angle to it, then or a European angle, we're kind of interested.
May I ask you, what's your take on the venture capital in Europe?
What's my take on it?
Yeah,
I mean, I think in the last 5 years, it's an industry that's seen remarkable amounts of change. Just the funding that has come into Europe in the world of VC has just changed from all recognition. It's made it a much, much more competitive environment within Europe, with more and more international VCs coming in as well. But it's also meant that the VC community, I think, has had to pull up its socks. It's had to do more. It has to provide much more than just capital now. The best entrepreneurs are having choice of who they get investment from, and that means the relationships that you build have become more important. And although we see public markets slowing down, we don't see any sign of that in the private markets, and especially within Europe.
how much you normally invest?
So Octopuss has as I say, we manage, getting up to sort of £2 billion in total. So we have a very wide mandate. We invest everything from first check all the way through to participating in Series C, D. So it's kind of anything from about 250,000 up to about 20 million that we'll invest in any one company. We may do a true patient capital. We may do that over a series of rounds. Depend what the team is, depend what the sector is. But yeah, we have a large breadth of deals that we're looking at.
When you invest early growth stage, what are the top concerns on both sides? Where do you find convention when investing? I don't know, the company, the team, the product.
Yeah, I think that it's sorry, I should have said earlier, it's worth noting that the ventures team, just due to the scale of how big we are, we ourselves are divided into sort of different areas of focus, where we have like a fintech team, a deep tech team, a consumer tech team. We do an awful lot in health tech, and then we have a B2B software team. So I particularly focus myself on B2B software, and that sort of area. And different teams will have different things that they're looking for and different concerns. Like our deep tech team, for example, is looking for product market fit in 7 years' time. They're looking to the future, and is this a technology that will be applicable in many years to come? B2B software team where I work is we're looking at companies and saying, do they have product market fit today? Do they really understand what their problem is, and is it a solution to that problem that can scale and can be worth a lot of money? I think more generically across all of those teams, the demand right now for talent is greater than it has ever been. So we have to back companies, we have to put founders that we think can inspire not just the idea, but also the people to follow them and to build those teams in order to be successful. So more and more, we're helping our companies with talent and trying to find good talent, and that therefore becomes really important when we're looking at companies? Is it somewhere where we think people will go?
I mean, we're just coming out from the pandemic. We are trying to come out. And before, probably it was very common to meet face to face the founders. Now, having a Zoom call is pretty normal. How important is for you face to face?
Less and less so. I think if somebody had told me that you could do a deal over a Zoom calls pre-pandemic, I'd have kind of laughed. But the truth is, we did transactions having never met the founders of those companies in person. So in that sense, not very important. I remember one of the first deals I did during the pandemic, and we went to a board meeting in person. And the actual founder said to me, he said, "You know what, Ed, I never realized how tall you were, because we'd only ever done Zoom calls before." So, we like to meet people in person. We still think there's definitely benefit of going to see people and seeing them face to face. But I think the big difference is whereas, pre-pandemic, you would have had companies coming into the office for meeting number one just to explain their business. That just never happens now. There's at least a few meetings before you go and do a site visit, and you may well never meet the people that you initially invest into. I think when it comes to added value and building relationships in board meetings and things like that, it's definitely at that point where a good mix, maybe you do every other board meeting over Zoom, but actually meeting in person and really working through the business challenges together can be beneficial.
What about after investing? How much do you like meeting the founders and be updated?
Yeah, well, that's what. So post investment, we generally have board meetings maybe 10 times a year, maybe less if the board already has quite good governance and knows what it's doing. But certainly, every quarter. But often in the early days, it's more like every month. And as I say, I like to make those board meetings at least one in every two in person. I just think I found you get a lot more from board meetings when people are in a room together rather than on Zoom.
And how involved do you get with your portfolio? And how do you add value?
Yeah, we get very involved. Different teams will get involved in different ways. Part of being part of Octopuss is that we have a very wide-reaching network because we're part of the wider group. And that comes with a good network of people that we can make introductions, etc. But we focus on the sort of core areas where we think that startups really need help. And number one, as I said, is in talent. So we have our own dedicated talent team. So if somebody joins the portfolio, they'll be provided with a talent manager who will come in and actually try and help with recruitment plans, organizational structures, understanding what compensation needs to be paid in the market, these kind of big questions. We also help on the fundraising side. So if we often follow our money, but we also realize that some people want to then raise even bigger amounts of money, and we have a very kind of deep structure in the ways in which we can do that. We work a lot with companies around their go-to-market strategy, often with what we call our venture partners, kind of seasoned entrepreneurs that have been there, done that, and really helping companies focus down on what their go-to-market strategy is and how they should go about it by using people that have been there and done that before. But I think one thing that's really important is that no two companies are the same. They'll have different challenges, and part of it is listening and understanding what those challenges are, and then trying to help where we can. But I think on balance, we're probably more actively involved within our portfolio than the average VC.
VC, for what is my understanding, is changing a lot. It was 10 years, 20 years ago. And now network is so important. Do you think when it comes to the founders, because there are so many funds now, founders should choose the investors also for the network they have, for them to follow up?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's easy to say, because obviously ultimately what you need is the funding. And if you only have one offer on the table, then that may be the offer you should go with. But if you are able to build competitive tension amongst VCs, and I shouldn't really say this as a VC, but if you can build competitive tension amongst VCs, that's what you should do. You should try and get multiple offers from different VCs, and then you should really look at them on more than just the money that they bring. The network that they can bring, people, added value, just experience as well. Like, for example, in my team, B2B software team, we invest in 10, 20 B2B software companies every single year. So we have a large portfolio of B2B software companies. That network can be invaluable because you can get CTOs that can talk to each other, you can get CEOs that can talk to each other and just learn from each other. So there's just if you go for a very small kind of independent VC family office type thing, then you're not going to have that same level of resources. Not to say that they can also be good investors, but you may have a different experience.
I agree. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of network. Would you lead investments? I suppose yes.
Yeah, I mean, we different investments, different. We lead and sometimes we co-invest. So it depends. I mean, majority of the deals we do, certainly for the first investment mate, we would lead it.
You already said when it comes to the round after the one you're done, you follow up with your money, but also you help with your network to find new investors for the next round. How much do you get involved in this process?
So heavily. If there's another big round coming and the company wants to raise, then we would get heavily involved in that, just because we've got the network. So we know what those VCs are looking for. We know the people in those VCs. They trust us that if we're going to bring them deal flow, that it's going to look good. And so it makes sense for us to get quite actively involved in that process.
I mean, you said already partially that you like, for example, CEOs to talk each other. How do you expect your investments in your portfolio to interact to some extent?
It depends. I mean, it depends on what the company is and what it needs and what experience it needs and what they can offer each other. We have things like our forums whereby, if there is any question that any CEO could ever need, like I think we had one recently, which is like, does anyone know of anyone that can do tax diligence in Canada or something like that? Just something that you just as a CEO, you wouldn't necessarily know. You can post a question and then within, usually hours, if not minutes, there'll be, 2 or 3 answers from different CEOs throughout the portfolio that can say, well, I've been there, I've done that. These are the people to use. If you've got visa issues in the US, for example, these are the people to use. If you've got office problems in the UK that you need to get solved, this is who to use. So we have a very active forum, which is useful. Good to have a place to go to, for CEOs to correspond and to share knowledge, really.
I mean, during the pandemic, there was one word very common: pivoting. What's your point of view on pivoting? It's so difficult for founders understanding when to pivot because they consider pivoting like failure.
I think maybe some do. I mean, so my team, we tend to go into more established startups, so companies when they've got into the millions of revenue. So certainly more than $1 million ARR is kind of where my team comes in. But I mean, almost any good business that you've ever, any story that you have ever seen has companies that's had a pivot. There aren't many. Uber started being a limousine hire company in San Francisco. Facebook was a university's platform. Airbnb was more about couch surfing, when it first started. There are multiple examples of great companies that have had to find their market over time. And actually, one of the things I look for in a founder is this person dogmatic about their idea? Can they actually listen? Can they listen to me? Can they listen to the market and develop their idea to try and find that product market fix? And if they are somebody who is dogmatic and so stuck in their idea and can't see the disadvantages as well as the advantages of it, that worries me because the market is a cruel master and you need to be able to flow with it rather than be completely fixated on what might be a good solution for yourself.
I mean, what happens if a startup fails?
What happens if a startup fails?
Fails, yeah.
It's the nature of the game, isn't it? It's the nature of It's just the nature of VC investing. There are different kind of sectors we have different tolerances for. Within B2B software, we invest into companies with fairly predictable revenue streams that have got established, and therefore there is a much lower failure rate than deep tech, where you're basically investing in things that haven't always found a product market fit yet, and therefore it's a risk reward basis. If you're investing into technology whereby it's still being developed and yet to find product market fit, the returns need to be commensurately large potentially in order to take that risk. But I don't see failure as a problem. I think learning from failure is important. Failure itself is not, can the CEO turn around, look at themselves and say, what did I learn from that? What would I do differently? But the nature of the game is that a large portion of whatever you invest into as a VC should fail. That's why you get the returns from the ones that succeed.
I mean, that's more personal. Why did you become an investor?
Oh, I think it's other than rock star and sports star, which would be my number one jobs. I mean, it's probably number three after that. I mean, it's fantastic. You get to meet, entrepreneurs are, they're a special breed of person, because you have to have a risk appetite, you have to have an enthusiasm and ability to kind of communicate your ideas and communicate with other people. And so, the fact that I get to deal with those people on a daily basis and get to invest in their ideas and get to invest in their people is super exciting. I mean, there's never a dull day. One day I'll be learning about one sector and the next another, and that's super exciting. And you can go on, without being an entrepreneur, you can a little bit go on that journey with the entrepreneur and get a feel for it. So, in your companies, you get to grow, get to love and grow with at the same time. So it's a really privileged position to be able to work with so many great people and so many great companies.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. It's a very exciting job. Which are the critical points that trigger your decision ultimately to invest? Because you see so many founders, so many decks, you talk to so many, but in the end of the day, you need to decide.
Well, I think, and I'd say to startups, don't get disheartened if you get a no from one investor or the other investor, because ultimately investors will have a mandate and they'll have a thing that they're looking for as well. So, the VC is not homogenous. It's like that every VC tends to be looking for slightly different things or different sectors. So, for example, my team only invest in B2B software companies that have that £1 million plus ARR. So if you don't fit into that category, straight away, I'm not going to be investing in you, because this just does not work. My investment strategy is. But then from there, the trigger points of why I invest is like, can that CEO communicate the story? Do I really think there is a problem here to be solved? And is the market opportunity large enough to make it interesting? Now, as I say, our deep tech team is looking for something different. They're looking for opportunities that could be worth billions of pounds in the future, and technologies that really make them excited. So their kind of appetite for opportunities is so much more geared around the founders, and not that we're not. The founder becomes super important with our team, but even more so, the kind of smaller you go and more exciting, I guess, in some respects you go in terms of the technologies you're investing into. So yeah, I would always encourage startups not to get too disheartened if the first investor they talk to doesn't like the idea. It's probably because they don't know the sector, or they're just not that stage of investor.
What is the perfect recipe for a great pitch, if there is one, if there is any?
Well, I think the first thing is, can you really illustrate the problem you're solving, and then can you explain that and then don't spend 20 slides then explaining the problem, which you see a lot. You get explain the problem quickly, and then explain the solution, your solution, and why your solution makes that problem go away, and then why that makes an exciting business, why the business model is exciting, why why it's scalable. VCs aren't into investing into small companies that aren't going to be big. They're not going to go for a one-man cake shop in the local town centre, because they can't make the returns that they're looking for. So you've got to talk about, as I say, the problem, the solution, and then why this business is going to be scalable in a way that's exciting. And I would say that first pitches, keep them fairly brief. You have to give enough information really so the investor can decide whether it's within their investment mandate to get involved. But you almost want to like build the relationship over time. You don't want to land a 60-page pitch deck on a VC's plate, because probably they're not going to read it anyway for pitch deck number one. But also it's good to kind of release information over time and use that in order to build the strength of the relationship with the VC. So yeah, be very clear about the key metrics and what you do, but also be so nice and concise in what problem you're solving.
I mean, how important is the IP belonging to the startup for you to invest?
How important is the
IP to the startup? For
again, really depends. Like if you're in deep tech, obviously deep tech team, the IP, or health tech in certain areas is super important. It's like it's everything to own the IP and make sure the company owns the IP. And so that the deep tech team will look very closely at that. For B2B software, generally, it's very hard to protect any IP you may have developed. And so the defensibility becomes usually about traction in the market, functionality of that product, and how easy it is to replicate that product. But in B2B software, it's very difficult to really get any sort of IP as such within the technology you're developing. But again, if you go down earlier, then it becomes much more important in deep tech and health tech and things like that.
I mean, what's your suggestion to funders when approaching a VC? What should they do? How should they approach a VC?
I mean, I think there's a stat that only, I think, 1 in 10 deals by a VC is ever done through kind of just a cold message that comes through. Very, very few decks are ever kind of picked up on and then run with. It tends not to happen. And I think that's probably a combination of two things. One, because we get a lot of decks and therefore we see, that if it's harder to pay attention to ones that have come in kind of cold. And also because often those decks wouldn't necessarily have been targeting the right investors. That all said, I don't really mind. I know there's some VCs that say we don't look at decks that come in cold, but I definitely wouldn't say that. We've got a page on our website where you can submit your deck. But the best way is to go through either a trusted platform, where VCs will be looking like Equity Match, somewhere where VCs can kind of go into, or through relationships, and those relationships might be advisor, quite often through other smaller VCs, through NEDs. It really depends. But if you can find somebody who works within the VC that somewhere within your network, that's probably your best way in, to try and kind of be guided. If a friend says I've got a friend who's got a business, then I'm probably more likely to look at that in depth than just something coming in cold. So it's probably a long answer, but ultimately the short answer is the more you can find a route into the VC one way or another is probably better than going in cold.
Warm introduction always helps. What would be the best and most promising sector for funders to start their venture in the coming years?
Wow, that's a huge question. And I would have said B2B software, but I still believe that, but obviously valuations for B2B software companies are very high right now. So, and there's a lot of people trying to get into B2B software type companies. But look, I think 5 years ago, the kind of ESG angle of a company was talked about and was maybe a tick box at the end. Now every VC is actively seeking out companies that are going to make the world better. The world has got some massive challenges around climate and health, and I genuinely believe that whereas VCs, being honest, we're probably a little bit like, give me a food delivery company that can deliver 5 minutes faster, and now going, actually, I want to invest in things that are going to move on the way that we think about the climate, are going to move on the way we think about global health and these sorts of things. So big problems, I think, are becoming more exciting to VC.
I mean, I would like to close with, there is so much talk and so much money going to metaverse, NFT, crypto. Do you think there is any future?
So I'm probably the wrong person to ask that. If you ask my fintech colleagues would be, they're all over the crypto and these sorts of things, and they would say one thing. For me, I tend to stay clear. I'm an old school kind of like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like, what is the problem I need to be solved here? So I'm if I hear metaverse, I generally switch off. My consumer team, on the other hand, my consumer team, on the other hand, would switch on, because the consumer team is all over that and they see massive opportunity there. And so it's just, again, you might have a metaverse opportunity. If you talk to me, I'm probably the wrong VC to talk to. If you talk to my colleague Matt, then he'd be, really keen to understand more about what you're saying. If you talked about you come to me with a new cryptocurrency or something, then I'm the wrong person. But my colleague Z in our fintech team, he would be, again, super interested in talking to you. But they have bigger minds and imaginations than I do.
Edward, thank you very much for coming to the Investor Talk. It's been a very great pleasure for me.
No worries. Thanks, Max.
Thank you. Take care.